The 7:42 a.m. bus pulled away from the curb just as Rachel's fingertips grazed its rain-slicked surface. She stood there, breathing hard, her leather portfolio clutched against her chest, watching the red taillights disappear into the morning traffic. 23 years of marriage, and this was the first time she'd missed the bus they sometimes took together when his car was in the shop. "Damn it," she muttered, pulling out her phone to call an Uber. The rain had started again, that persistent Seattle drizzle that seemed to seep into everything. She stepped back under the bus shelter's overhang, squinting at her screen through the droplets on her glasses. That's when she saw them. Across the street, through the steamed-up windows of Brewster's Café, her husband Marcus sat at their usual corner table. But he wasn't alone. A woman with auburn hair was pressed against him, her arms wrapped around his shoulders, her face buried in his neck. It wasn't just a friendly hug. Rachel had given and received enough of those to know the difference. This was intimate, desperate. The woman's fingers clutched at Marcus's shirt like she was drowning, and he was the only solid thing in an ocean of uncertainty. Rachel's phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering on the wet pavement. The sound seemed impossibly loud in her ears, even though there was no way they could have heard it from inside the cafe. But Marcus looked up. Their eyes met through the rain and glass and the burden of 23 years. The color drained from his face so completely that the woman pulled back, alarmed. She followed his gaze to the window, to Rachel standing there in her rain-soaked coat, portfolio still pressed against her chest like armor. For a moment, nobody moved. The city rushed around them, cars splashing through puddles, pedestrians hurrying past with umbrellas, a dog barking somewhere in the distance. But in their little triangle of shock, time had crystallized into something sharp and brittle. Marcus stood up so abruptly that he knocked over his coffee cup. The dark liquid spread across the table like an accusation. The woman, younger than Rachel by at least a decade, pretty in that effortless way that required significant effort, reached for his arm. But he was already moving toward the door. Rachel didn't wait to see more. She turned and walked away, her sensible heels clicking against the wet sidewalk with mechanical precision. She heard the cafe door burst open behind her, heard Marcus calling her name, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. If she stopped, she would have to feel everything that was building behind the dam of her shock. And she wasn't ready for that flood. Not yet. 6 months earlier, Rachel would have laughed if someone had suggested Marcus might have an affair. They weren't that couple. They were the ones their friends envied, still holding hands at dinner parties, still leaving each other silly notes in lunch boxes, still slow dancing in the kitchen while dinner simmered on the stove. "You two make me sick," their friend Diane had said at their last anniversary party, but she'd been smiling when she said it. 22 years and you still look at each other like teenagers. Rachel had felt Marcus's hand tighten around hers under the table. "We got lucky," he'd said simply, and she'd believed him. God, how she'd believed him. The changes had been so gradual, she hadn't noticed them until now. Standing in her living room with rain still dripping from her coat, trying to pinpoint when exactly their life had started to fracture, Marcus had taken on a new project at the architectural firm in January. A downtown high-rise. That would be his biggest commission to date. The stress had been immediate and visible. He'd started working late, bringing home rolls of blueprints that covered their dining table like maps to a country she couldn't visit. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from contractors, clients, city planners. "I'm sorry, Rach," he'd say, kissing her forehead before disappearing into his home office again. "Once this project is done, we'll take that trip to Portugal you've been planning." She'd been understanding. Of course she had. Her own job as a financial analyst wasn't exactly lustrous, and there had been plenty of times over the years when she'd been the one buried in spreadsheets until midnight. Marriage was about taking turns carrying the weight. But then there were the small things. The new cologne that appeared on his dresser, something expensive and unfamiliar that made him smell like a stranger. The gym membership he'd suddenly decided to use after years of letting it lapse. The way he'd started turning his phone face down during dinner, something he'd never done before. "You're being paranoid," she'd told herself. Standing in their bathroom one night, studying her own reflection, at 48, she thought she still looked good. Her dark hair had threads of silver now, but they caught the light in a way she'd decided was distinguished rather than aging. She'd kept herself in shape with morning runs and weekend hikes, but standing there, she'd wondered if Marcus still saw her the way he used to, or if she'd become part of the furniture of his life, comfortable, reliable, invisible. The woman in the cafe had been none of those things. Rachel's phone rang. Marcus's ringtone, the opening bars of Your Song by Elton John. the same song they'd danced to at their wedding. She let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. On the fourth call, she turned it off entirely. She moved through their house like an archaeologist, suddenly seeing evidence everywhere. The receipt from a restaurant she'd never been to, crumpled in his jacket pocket when she'd taken it to the dry cleaner last month. The second phone charger in his car that didn't match either of their phones. The weekend site visits that had started 2 months ago, always on Saturdays when she had her book club or yoga class. In his office, she found the blueprints for the high-rise project. The client's name was printed in the corner, Whitfield Development. She Googled it on her laptop. The CEO was a man named James Whitfield, 63 years old, with a wife and 3 adult children. But the project manager, the one who would be working directly with the architects, was listed as Sophia Whitfield, his daughter. Auburn-haired, 34-year-old Sophia Whitfield, whose photo on the company website showed the same delicate features and uncertain smile. Rachel had glimpsed through the cafe window. Rachel stared at the photo until her eyes burned. Sophia had that look some women never lost, like she was still surprised by her own beauty, still uncertain of her place in the world, despite her father's money and her impressive resume. It was a vulnerability that would appeal to Marcus. Rachel knew he'd always had a savior complex, always been drawn to people who needed him. Had Rachel stopped needing him? When had she become so competent, so self-sufficient, that he'd had to look elsewhere for someone to rescue? The front door opened, downstairs. Rachel heard Marcus's keys hit the bowl by the door, heard his footsteps on the stairs urgent, taking them 2 at a time. She stayed where she was, sitting in his desk chair, Sophia's photo still glowing on her laptop screen. He appeared in the doorway, rain-soaked and breathless. His face was a study in contrasts: guilt and defiance, fear and determination. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the room that smelled like his cologne and coffee and 23 years of shared life. "It's not what you think," he said finally. Rachel laughed. She couldn't help it. The cliché was so perfect, so absolutely what she'd expected him to say, that laughter bubbled up from some hysterical place in her chest. "Really," she said, "because what I think is that I saw my husband embracing another woman in our cafe. Yes, Marcus, our cafe, where we had our first date, like the world was ending, and she was his only shelter. So please, enlighten me. What should I be thinking instead?" Marcus stepped into the room, closing the door behind him, as if they needed privacy in their own empty house. He was still wearing his good suit, the charcoal one she'd helped him pick out last Christmas, now rumpled and rain-spotted. He looked older suddenly, the lines around his eyes deeper than she remembered. "Her name is Sophia," he said quietly. "Sophia Whitfield, I know who she is." Rachel turned the laptop around so he could see the screen. Project manager at Whitfield Development, 34 years old, Stanford MBA, engaged to a hedge fund manager named Bradley Chen, according to her social media. She'd done more research while waiting for him to come home, though I notice she hasn't posted any photos with Bradley in the last 3 months. Marcus flinched. They broke up in February. Rachel closed the laptop with deliberate calm. "And you were, what, comforting her? Is that what we're calling it?" "Rachel, please, how long?" He moved toward the window, looking out at their backyard where her garden was starting to bloom tulips and daffodils she'd planted last fall, expecting to enjoy them together this spring. It's complicated." "How long?" "Nothing physical happened until last month," he said to the window. "But, double quotes," he trailed off. "But you've been falling in love with her since January." Rachel was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Every late night at the office, every weekend site visit, every time you turned your phone face down at dinner, you were falling in love with her." Marcus turned around, and she saw tears in his eyes. In 23 years, she'd seen him cry exactly 4 times: when his father died, when their son Leo was born, when they'd lost the baby that would have been their second child, and when Leo had left for college last year. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said. "God, Rachel, you have to know that. I fought it. I tried to keep it professional, but she was going through such a hard time with the breakup and the pressure from her father, and she understood what I was going through with the project in a way that I couldn't." Rachel stood up, her calm finally cracking. "Because I was too busy keeping our life running while you disappeared into this project, paying our bills, managing our son's college tuition, planning our meals, keeping our friends updated on why you kept missing dinners, all while working 50 hours a week myself. That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean, Marcus? Help me understand how you accidentally fell in love with someone else." Walk me through the logic of that. He sank into the leather chair by the window, the one where he liked to read on Sunday mornings. Do you remember when we first met, how you used to look at me like I could design a building that could touch the sky? Like I was capable of anything. You are capable of anything. You're designing a 40-story building downtown, but you don't look at me that way anymore. His voice was so quiet she almost missed it. You look at me like I'm a project to be managed, another item on your to-do list. Pay bills, call plumber, remind Marcus about dentist appointment. Rachel felt the words like a physical blow. Are you seriously blaming me for your affair because I remembered your dentist appointments? No, I'm trying to explain that you needed someone to worship you again. That 23 years of real life and real love wasn't as exciting as a younger woman thinking you hung the moon. She sees me, Marcus said, looking up at her with those tears still swimming in his eyes. Not the husband who forgot to fix the garage door, or the father who missed Leo's last high school soccer game, or the man who's been promising to take you to Portugal for 5 years. She sees the architect, the creator, the man I used to be before I got lost in mortgages and routine and commitment. Rachel's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Is that what you got lost in, Marcus? The terrible burden of the life we built together? He stood up, reaching for her, but she stepped back. I'm not saying this right, Rachel. I love you. I've loved you since the moment you walked into that cafe 24 years ago. With paint in your hair from helping your sister redecorate. You ordered a triple shot espresso at 4 p.m. and told me you didn't believe in decaf. You were the most alive person I'd ever met. Rachel said, past tense. We got comfortable. We got routine. We became roommates who happened to share a bed. We became partners. That's what marriage is. But when did we stop being lovers? When did we stop staying up until 3 a.m. talking about our dreams? When did we stop surprising each other? Rachel felt something cold settle in her chest. When you started giving all your surprises to her. The silence stretched between them, filled with 23 years of accumulated weight. Outside, a car drove by, its tires hissing on the wet street. Normal life continuing while theirs imploded. What does she give you that I don't? Rachel finally asked, hating herself for needing to know. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Possibility, he said finally. The feeling that my story isn't already written, that I could be someone different, someone better. Someone without a wife, Rachel said flatly. But it's not. Did you sleep with her? The question hung in the air like a sword. Marcus's silence was answer enough. How many times? Does it matter? How many times? Marcus, 3 times. Rachel nodded slowly, as if this information was simply data to be processed. Where, Rochelle? Where? Here, in our bed. God, no, never here. Her apartment, twice. Once at the construction site, after hours. Rachel laughed again. That same hysterical bubble. How cinematic. Did you lay her down on your blueprints? Did you make love to her while looking at your dreams made tangible? Marcus's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. Are you in love with her? He didn't answer immediately, which was an answer in itself. Rachel felt something inside her break, not her heart, exactly, but something deeper. The foundation she'd built her entire adult life on, cracking like concrete under too much pressure. I don't know, he finally said. I think I'm in love with who I am when I'm with her. Rachel walked past him, out of his office, down the hallway lined with family photos, their wedding, Leo's first birthday, family vacations to the coast, Christmas mornings in pajamas. Marcus followed her, still trying to explain, to justify, to make her understand, but his words were just noise now. In their bedroom, she pulled out her suitcase from the closet. What are you doing? Marcus asked from the doorway. What does it look like? She opened drawers, pulling out clothes with mechanical precision. I'm leaving, Rachel, please. Can't we talk about this? Go to counseling. Try to work through it. She paused, a stack of carefully folded sweaters in her arms. Do you want to work through it? Yes, God, yes. I don't want to lose you. But you don't want to lose her either. His silence confirmed it. Rachel continued packing. Here's what's going to happen, she said, her voice returning to that eerie calm. I'm going to go stay with my sister Ellen for a while. You're going to have some time to figure out what you want. But Marcus, she turned to look at him. I need you to understand something. I'm not going to compete for you. I'm not going to try to be shinier or newer or more exciting than Sophia. I'm 48 years old. I've given you 23 years, a son, a home, and every dream I had that included the word we instead of I. If that's not enough, If you need someone to look at you like you're a god instead of a human being I've loved through every season of life, then we're done, Rachel. And if you choose her," she continued, zipping the suitcase closed, "if you choose the possibility of her over the reality of us, then I hope she's worth it. I hope she's worth Leo trying to figure out how to split holidays between his parents. I hope she's worth explaining to our friends why you threw away a marriage they all envied. I hope she's worth waking up at 60 and realizing you traded a partner for a mirror that made you feel young." She pulled the suitcase off the bed, the wheels hitting the floor with a definitive thud. "I wasn't looking for this," Marcus said desperately. "I wasn't unhappy. I didn't wake up one day and decide to have an affair." "No," Rachel agreed, pulling on her coat. "You made 1,000 small decisions. Every time you chose to confide in her instead of me. Every time you deleted a text. Every time you let her look at you like you hung the moon without saying, 'I'm married, and I love my wife.' You chose this 1,000 times. Marcus, you just want to pretend it was only once." She moved past him, suitcase rolling behind her. At the top of the stairs, she turned back one more time. Marcus was still standing in their bedroom doorway, looking lost in his own home. "The saddest part," she said, "if you'd come to me 3 months ago and said you were feeling disconnected, feeling invisible, feeling like we'd lost something, I would have fought for us. I would have done whatever it took. But you didn't give me that chance. You gave it to her instead." The drive to Ellen's house was 45 minutes through Seattle traffic. Rachel made it without crying, her hands steady on the wheel, NPR playing softly on the radio. She parked in Ellen's driveway, looking at the warm lights of her sister's kitchen through the rain. Ellen opened the door before Rachel could knock, took one look at her face, and pulled her into a hug. "Marcus," was all she said. Rachel nodded against her sister's shoulder. "Another woman, another nod. That fucking idiot," Ellen said with such vehemence that Rachel finally broke. The tears coming in great, gasping sobs that shook her entire body. Ellen held her there in the doorway, rain still falling, the porch light creating a circle of warmth in the darkness. "Come on," Ellen finally said, pulling her inside. "Let's get you some wine and figure out how to destroy him." "I don't want to destroy him," Rachel said, her voice ragged. "I want to not love him anymore." "How do I do that, Elle? How do I stop loving someone who's been half of me for my entire adult life?" Ellen led her to the kitchen, poured 2 generous glasses of red wine, and sat across from her at the worn wooden table where they'd done homework as kids, where they'd planned Rachel's wedding, where they'd cried together after their mother's funeral 5 years ago. "You don't stop loving him," Ellen said quietly. "You just learn to love yourself more." 3 weeks passed in a blur of lawyer consultations, apartment hunting, and long walks through Ellen's neighborhood. Rachel had called Leo, their son, trying to explain without destroying his relationship with his father. "Is it Sophia?" Leo had asked immediately. Rachel's shock must have been audible in her silence. "I met her at Dad's office during winter break," Leo explained, his voice careful over the phone from his dorm room. The way she looked at him, I hoped I was wrong. "Oh honey, I'm so angry at him, Mom. How could he do this to you? To us. People are complicated," Rachel said, even though she wanted to agree. Wanted to rage with her son about the unfairness of it all. "Your father loves you. This doesn't change that. It changes everything else though, doesn't it?" Yes, Rachel thought. Yes, it does. Marcus had texted her every day, long messages at first, full of apologies and explanations and pleas for another chance. Then shorter ones. "I miss you. The house feels wrong without you. Please come home." She didn't respond to any of them. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, as she was signing papers for a small apartment in Fremont, her phone rang. Not Marcus this time, a number she didn't recognize. "Is this Rachel Morrison?" The woman's voice was tentative, nervous. "Yes, this is Sophia." "Sophia Whitfield." Rachel's hand tightened on the phone, but she kept her voice level. "I know who you are. I needed to talk to you. I don't think that's appropriate. Please." The woman's voice cracked. "Just 5 minutes. I'm at Brewster's Café. I know you have no reason to meet me. BUT, please." Rachel looked at the real estate agent, who was pretending not to eavesdrop while organizing already organized papers. "I need to reschedule," Rachel told her. "Something's come up." The drive to Brewster's felt like traveling backward through time, the same route she'd taken with Marcus hundreds of times, the same parking spot she'd parallel parked in that first date when he'd offered to do it for her, and she'd laughed and said she was a grown woman who could park her own car. "Thank you very much," Sophia was sitting at the corner table, that same corner table, looking smaller and younger than Rachel had expected. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Rachel sat down across from her without preamble. "Thank you for coming," Sophia said. "What do you want?" Sophia wrapped her hands around her coffee cup as if trying to absorb its warmth. "I wanted to tell you that it's over. Marcus and me. It was over the day you saw us." Rachel waited. "That morning, I'd told him I was in love with him. I'd asked him to leave you." Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. "He said no. He said he'd made a terrible mistake. That Hugusai was begging him to reconsider, but he'd already made up his mind. And you thought I should know this, why?" Sophia looked up, and Rachel saw tears tracking down her cheeks. "Because I destroyed something beautiful for nothing. Because I fell in love with a man who talked about you constantly, even when he was with me. Rachel loves this song. Rachel would find that funny. Rachel makes this dish that would be perfect with this wine." "Don't," Rachel said sharply. "Don't you dare try to make me feel sorry for you. I'm not. I wanted you to know that he chose you. That morning, before you saw us, he chose you." "No," Rachel said, standing up. "He chose me after he'd already chosen you 100 times. That's not the same thing." She walked out of the cafe without looking back, but she could hear Sophia crying behind her. That evening, Marcus showed up at Ellen's house. Ellen answered the door, ready to send him away, but Rachel appeared behind her. "It's okay," she told her sister. "Give us a minute." They stood on the porch, Marcus looking haggard in jeans and an old sweater she'd bought him years ago. "Sophia told me she talked to you," he said. "She did. I ended it with her that morning, before you saw us. I swear to you, Rachel, I'd already ended it." "I know." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Does that mean can we try to work through this?" Rachel looked at him. Rayleigh looked at him. He was still handsome. Still the man who'd made her laugh on their first date by doing terrible impressions of famous architects. Still the man who'd held her hair when morning sickness hit during her pregnancy with Leo. Still the man who'd slow danced with her in their kitchen just 6 months ago, before Sophia, before the cracks became chasms. "I love you," she said, and watched his face transform with relief. "I probably always will. But Marcus, I don't trust you anymore. And I don't know if I can learn to again. We can try counseling. I've started seeing someone, a therapist. For myself." Rachel pulled her coat tighter. "She asked me something interesting. She asked if I could forgive you. Really forgive you. Without needing you to prove yourself forever. Without checking your phone or wondering when you're working late. Without seeing Sophia's face every time you touch me." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I didn't know, and until I do know, I can't come back." Marcus reached for her hand, and she let him take it. His fingers were cold, familiar. "I threw it all away, didn't I?" he said quietly. 23 years, and I threw it away for 3 months of feeling special." "You didn't throw it away," Rachel said, squeezing his hand once before letting go. "You traded it. The question is whether what you got was worth what you paid." She went back inside, leaving him on the porch. Through the window, she watched him walk slowly back to his car, the sensible sedan they'd bought together 2 years ago, joking about becoming the middle-aged couple with the boring car and the exciting secrets. The irony wasn't lost on her now. 6 months later, Rachel stood in her new apartment, hanging the last of her pictures. Not family photos, those were still in boxes. Too painful to display, but new art she'd bought at Pike Place Market. Bright abstracts that made her small space feel larger. The divorce papers were signed but not yet final. Washington required a 90-day waiting period. The state's way of asking, "Are you sure?" She was sure about the divorce, less sure about what came after. Marcus had started therapy too. He sent her updates sometimes, not asking for reconciliation anymore, just sharing his journey. He was trying to understand why he'd made the choices he had. Why he'd needed external validation so desperately that he'd risked everything for it. Leo came to visit her new place for Thanksgiving. They cooked together, badly, laughing at their burned Brussels sprouts and soggy stuffing. "Dad's alone today," Leo said carefully, as they ate their imperfect meal. "I know, Sophia's engaged again, to someone else. Dad told me." Rachel was surprised to find the news didn't hurt. "Good for her. Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" Rachel considered the question, looking at her son, who had his father's eyes but her stubborn chin. "I already have," she said. "Forgiveness was easier than I expected. It's the forgetting that's impossible." That night, after Leo had gone to bed in her tiny guest room, Rachel stood at her window looking out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. The house sold today. End of an era. She'd agreed to sell their home, unable to imagine either of them living there alone, haunted by the ghosts of a marriage that had once been the envy of their friends. Beginning of a new one, she texted back. 3 dots appeared, showing he was typing. They appeared and disappeared several times, as if he was writing and deleting responses. Finally, I'm sorry, Rachel, for all of it, but mostly for not seeing what I had until I'd already lost it. Rachel stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed, I know. Be well, Marcus. She put her phone down and made herself tea, settling into her new reading chair with a book she'd been meaning to start for years. Outside, Seattle continued its eternal drizzle, but inside her small apartment, everything was warm and dry and entirely hers. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through her windows, a rare November gift in Seattle. She made coffee in her tiny kitchen, different from the elaborate espresso machine Marcus had insisted they needed, but perfectly adequate for her needs. Her phone rang. For a moment, her heart jumped, thinking it might be Marcus, but it was Ellen. Want to go hiking? Her sister asked. It's gorgeous out. Give me 30 minutes. As she laced up her hiking boots, the ones she'd bought after the separation, along with a backpack and a determination to try all the trails she'd put off for some day, Rachel thought about possibility. Marcus had said Sophia gave him possibility, the feeling that his story wasn't already written. But standing in her apartment, sun on her face, a day of adventure ahead, with no one to check in with or compromise with, Rachel realized she'd found possibility to, not in someone else's eyes, but in her own reflection, the possibility of discovering who she was when she wasn't half of something else. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus. I dream about that morning at the bus stop, about what would have happened if you'd caught the bus. If you'd never seen us. Rachel deleted the message without responding. She'd learned that some questions weren't meant to be answered. Some paths weren't meant to be retraced. She grabbed her backpack, locked her apartment, and headed out into the bright November morning. At the bus stop near her building, a different stop, a different route. She thought about that morning 8 months ago, when she'd missed the 7:42, and her entire life had changed in the span of a heartbeat. The bus arrived on time, and she climbed aboard, finding a seat by the window. As the city rolled by, Rachel pulled out her phone and opened a new message to Marcus. She typed, I'm glad I missed the bus. Then she deleted it, unsent. Some truths were just for herself. The bus carried her toward the mountains, toward Ellen, toward trails she'd never hiked and views she'd never seen. Her reflection in the window showed a woman she was still getting to know, one who was learning to take up her own space, make her own choices, and find her own way. It had taken 48 years and a broken marriage, but Rachel was finally discovering that sometimes the most important love story is the one you write with yourself. That she stepped off the bus at the trailhead. Ellen was waiting with coffee and a smile, ready for an adventure. More than ready, Rachel said, and meant it. They headed up the trail together, leaving the city and its complications behind. With each step, Rachel felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of trying to save something that had already ended. The sun broke through the trees, dappling the path ahead with light and shadow and tan, beautiful, and entirely hers to navigate. Behind her, far below, the city continued its routines. Somewhere in it, Marcus was probably at his office, surrounded by blueprints for buildings that would touch the sky. Somewhere else, Sophia was planning a wedding to someone new, someone safer, and somewhere between memory and possibility, the ghost of a 23-year marriage was finally being laid to rest. But here, on this mountain, with her sister beside her and the trail ahead, Rachel was exactly where she needed to be. Not the ending she'd planned, but maybe the beginning she deserved.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.